A canine patrol rushed to the city helipad late at night. The dog would not stop barking, its focus locked on one spot as officers closed in. When they cleared the area, what they uncovered made every single person step back in shock. Why was it hidden there? The night was cool and unusually quiet for a city that rarely slept. A faint hum of distant traffic rolled across the skyline, but the small police helipad at the edge of downtown stood isolated, its circular landing zone marked by worn yellow paint and surrounded by towering floodlights that flickered with occasional static. It was supposed to be empty that night, no scheduled flights, no officers assigned to be there. Yet something about the place drew the sharp attention of a single canine. Ranger, a seasoned German Shepherd trained in search and detection, was out on a routine patrol with his handler. The path they usually took never passed near the helipad, but that night Ranger stiffened, nose high, ears rigid, and pulled against the leash with unusual urgency. The handler knew this wasn't a random distraction. Ranger's instincts had saved lives before, and his sudden fixation carried weight. When they reached the edge of the helipad, Ranger's behavior grew intense. His body locked, tail stiff, his bark cut through the night with an authority that echoed against the concrete. The sound startled nearby patrolmen who turned their flashlights toward the barking dog. Ranger wasn't circling aimlessly. He was fixated on the southern edge of the landing pad where the concrete blended into the gravel perimeter. He dug his paws hard against the ground, claws scraping as if trying to rip open what couldn't be seen. The first assumption was simple. Perhaps an animal. Stray dogs or raccoons sometimes wandered into isolated corners of the city. But as more officers arrived, flashlights scanning every corner, the site appeared oddly untouched. No animals, no people, nothing out of place, at least not to the human eye. Yet Ranger wouldn't stop barking, his chest heaving, his entire body pushing against the handler's restraint. It was then that one of the officers noticed something unusual, a faint metallic glint near the base of the pad, almost invisible beneath loose gravel. They brushed it aside and uncovered the edge of a concealed latch, a hidden entry point sealed into the ground. The mood shifted instantly. What was a locked hatch doing buried under the helipad? And why would a dog detect it? A chain of questions rippled through the team. Was something stored beneath? Was it dangerous? Ranger's senses had never been wrong, and the intensity of his warning left no one comfortable with ignoring it. The team called in backup. Within minutes, a small unit arrived with equipment to test the hatch. As they pried against the metal edges, a strange chill drifted from the opening, a rush of air that smelled stale, almost chemical. The kind of scent that wasn't from the open air, but from something sealed away for a long time. Ranger snarled louder, teeth bared toward the gap as though whatever lay beneath carried a danger unseen. Inside, narrow concrete steps descended into darkness. The officers, uneasy but compelled, formed a team to enter. Ranger refused to stay behind. His paws dug in until the handler relented, leading him down the stairs. The air grew heavier with every step. The underground chamber wasn't large, bare walls, low ceiling. Yet what filled the space froze everyone. Dozens of large metal crates stacked tightly, each marked with faded stencils and codes that didn't match anything familiar. No official police or military insignia. No records existed about storage at this location. One officer tested a crate's surface, cold to the touch, layers of dust and grime coating its steel. Ranger paced sharply in circles, barking and growling at specific boxes as if they contained something alive or dangerous. The handler tried to calm him, but his agitation only grew. The dog's focus shifted from one crate to another, then back again, like he was trying to point toward something deeper inside. The crates were sealed tight, heavy enough that moving them without tools was impossible. Questions grew heavier. Why were they here? Who put them there? And why had no one known? The team marked the site and radioed for specialized units to investigate. Until then, no one was to touch the contents. But Ranger's behavior left the officers uneasy. It wasn't just that he barked. His every movement suggested urgency, like time itself was against them. Above ground, the helipad looked normal again, silent under the city lights. But beneath, a hidden world had been uncovered, one that wasn't supposed to exist. The officers sealed off the area, but none could ignore the thought pressing on them all. If Ranger hadn't been there, if the dog hadn't refused to let them leave, this chamber might have stayed buried forever. What exactly was hidden in those crates? And why did Ranger seem to know that opening them would change everything? The chamber beneath the helipad was sealed off through the night. Police tape stretched across the landing zone, patrol cars lined the perimeter, and every eye was fixed on the quiet circle of concrete as though it hid something that could erupt at any moment. By dawn, a specialized unit arrived, bomb squad, hazmat experts, and federal observers. The crates were still untouched, their dull metallic surfaces gleaming faintly in the low light of the chamber. Each one looked identical, about chest high, with rust creeping along the edges. The stenciled codes, numbers, symbols, and faded paint were meaningless to most who saw them, but the secrecy of their placement told a different story. Ranger was restless from the moment he descended the stairs again. His paws scraped against the concrete floor, nose twitching rapidly, his head jerking from one crate to another. Unlike before, his focus tightened on a row along the back wall. He barked sharply, the sound cracking against the narrow chamber. The handler tightened the leash, but Ranger's body was rigid, his eyes refusing to shift. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Ranger wasn't just alerting generally, he was picking something out. The crates in the farthest corner held his absolute focus. The bomb squad tested the outer layers first. Scans revealed dense contents, metallic in some, softer in others. No explosives detected on the surface. Yet as one officer swept a sensor over the box, an anomaly appeared. Faint heat signatures inside, too steady to be random. Something alive? Or machinery still running? The handler studied Ranger carefully. His bark carried no hesitation. It was urgent, insistent, as though he knew there was no time to waste. The decision was made. They would open a crate. When the first steel lid groaned free, a rush of air burst outward, stale and heavy with chemical traces. Inside, the officers froze. Stacks of medical vials, carefully arranged, glimmered faintly under flashlight beams. The glass tubes were labeled with coded markers, sealed tight with wax-like tops. None carried recognizable branding. Some liquid inside was clear, others tinted faint shades of blue or amber. Dozens upon dozens of them filled the crate like an organized library of something not meant for discovery. Hazmat officers leaned closer. The marking suggested biological samples or experimental serums. But why were they hidden under a police helipad? And for how long? Ranger wasn't done. He pulled violently toward the back row, claws scraping as if trying to dig through steel itself. The handler followed reluctantly, shining his light over the next crate. Unlike the others, this one bore deep scratches across its surface, as though it had been dragged here in haste. Dust patterns around it were broken, fresher than the rest. The officers opened it with care. This time, the contents were far more alarming. Inside lay electronic devices, compact transmitters, strange antenna-like rods, and sealed packs of wiring. Alongside them were military-grade tools that seemed out of place in a civilian setting. The equipment wasn't in official use anymore, but it was sophisticated enough to suggest organized operations. The realization grew heavier. This wasn't storage, this was a hideout. The helipad had been built over something deliberately concealed, something never meant to be found. One officer voiced a thought that sent a ripple of unease. If the crates contained biological material and communication devices, then whoever placed them here had intentions far larger than smuggling. They were preparing something, and Ranger had found it just in time. Above ground, the city buzzed, unaware of what was unfolding below. Helicopters passed overhead, business commuters rushed through their morning routines, and no one knew that beneath a quiet helipad, a secret chamber could alter everything. The investigative team traced records of the helipad construction. Oddly, there was a gap in official documentation, a missing period of 3 months during which no logs existed about supply movements. Whoever buried the crates had done it during that time, using access that should never have been available. Still, one question gnawed at the officers. Why was Ranger so fixated on certain crates, even beyond the shocking discoveries? It wasn't just instinct. The dog's reaction was layered. Fear, aggression, and urgency all fused into one. To test it, they opened another box from the corner. Ranger barked at most. What they found silenced the room. Inside, wrapped in thick plastic, were sealed folders and photographs. The documents were worn, some edges charred, but enough remained legible to reveal chilling connections. Blueprints of the city's transit hubs, notes on police patrol patterns, even aerial images of hospitals and schools marked with red circles. This wasn't storage, this was planning. The officers exchanged looks, each understanding the weight of what lay before them. Someone had used this hidden chamber not just for storing materials, but for preparing something catastrophic. Yet Ranger still barked, louder, pressing against the handler as though even this wasn't the full truth. He pawed the floor beneath one of the crates, scratching so hard his nails clicked sharply against concrete. The officer knelt and brushed the dust aside. Beneath the grime, a faint outline of another panel appeared, smaller than the hatch above but just as carefully hidden. A second compartment. The atmosphere thickened as they pried it open. Inside, a narrow tunnel sloped deeper underground, lined with concrete and faintly lit by long dead bulbs. The tunnel stretched out of sight, vanishing into silence. Ranger lunged toward it, his growl low and fierce. Whatever he sensed wasn't just old storage, it was present, alive. The team stopped. If the crates had been alarming, then the tunnel suggested something even more dangerous. The handler steadied Ranger, but his barking echoed into the shaft like a warning bell. There was more down there, something that explained why all this had been hidden, something that could not remain buried. The officers prepared themselves, each step forward carrying the weight of uncertainty. The first chamber had been shocking, but what lay beyond the tunnel would decide whether this discovery was a tragedy waiting to happen or a chance to stop it before it began. The air inside the tunnel was different, heavier, warmer, and mixed with the faint hum of machines. Dust clung to the walls, and the floor bore recent footprints. Whoever had used this passage hadn't abandoned it long ago. The realization added a fresh weight to the officer's every step. Ranger led the way. His body was low to the ground, tail stiff, nose pressed forward with sharp sniffs. His bark had stopped, replaced with a deep growl that rolled through the narrow tunnel like thunder. The handler trusted the dog more than the dim flashlights guiding them. Ranger always knew when danger was closer than the eye could see. The passage twisted sharply before opening into a larger underground chamber. Here, the truth of the helipad's secret revealed itself. Rows of makeshift desks lined the walls, scattered with papers, half-burned maps, and disconnected communication equipment. But in the center of the room, the most chilling discovery lay in plain sight, a series of containers fitted with timer mechanisms and strange wiring. They weren't active now, but the construction made their intent unmistakable. These were devices meant to cause destruction. The officers froze, flashlights darting across the chamber, each one registering the same fear. This wasn't a forgotten cache. It was a planned staging ground for an attack. Ranger pulled again, this time toward the farthest corner. Beneath a draped tarp, the dog barked furiously, pawing at the floor with renewed urgency. When the officers yanked the tarp away, they found another hidden panel. This one opened with ease, revealing a small, cold storage compartment. Inside were bundles of vials like those seen earlier, sealed but carefully packed into insulated cases, ready for transport. The realization was brutal. Whoever had built this underground hub hadn't just been preparing explosives. They were preparing biological materials too, but it wasn't finished. The timers were disconnected. Some equipment was dismantled. Whoever had been here had either abandoned the plan or been forced to leave in haste. Then the evidence connected. On the desks lay a logbook, pages scribbled with coded entries. The officers flipped through, scanning quickly. Patterns emerged, dates, times, and locations marked across the city. One date circled repeatedly was tomorrow. The silence grew thick. Tomorrow was supposed to be the city's annual public parade, an event where tens of thousands would gather. The officers didn't need to speak. The meaning was clear. Everything hidden under the helipad pointed to a plot designed for that very day, a plan that could have ended an unthinkable disaster, and if not for Ranger, none of this would have been uncovered. Yet even with the discovery, one question remained. Where were the people behind it? The chamber showed signs of recent use, but its occupants were gone. Still, Ranger wouldn't calm down. His ears twitched, head snapping toward a section of wall. He barked again, claws raking the concrete. The handler stepped closer. The wall, though solid, carried faint echoes when struck. A false surface. Behind it, perhaps, was more than just storage. With tools, the officers broke through. The wall crumbled to reveal a narrow crawl space. Inside, curled in the shadows, was a figure. Thin, shivering, bound by rope. A young man. Barely in his 20s, his eyes wide with fear as the flashlight struck him. He wasn't armed, he wasn't resisting. When pulled into the open, it became clear he had been kept prisoner. Scattered beside him were notes written in frantic handwriting. He had been forced to help transport the crates and work on the wiring. He hadn't volunteered, he had been taken. His captors had left him here, gagged and tied, planning to return later. Ranger sniffed him once, then sat calmly at his side, as though signaling that the threat wasn't from this boy but from those who had vanished into the night. The prisoner's information became the final piece of the puzzle. Through his notes and whispered explanations, the officers learned the plot's depth. A coordinated attack intended to cripple the city during the parade, with both explosives and biological material. But delays and Ranger's discovery had disrupted it. The leaders hadn't expected their hideout beneath the helipad to be exposed. The evidence was enough to trigger a citywide alert. The parade was secured, potential accomplices hunted down, and the hidden crates safely transported for disposal. No disaster unfolded the next day. The city marched safely, unaware of how close it had come to tragedy. But the officers knew, and they knew who had stopped it. Back at the station, Ranger lay on the cool tiles, his chest rising and falling steadily after long hours of work. The handler sat beside him, running a hand through the thick fur along his neck. The others in the room were quiet, their respect for the K-9 heavy in the air. If Ranger hadn't barked at the helipad that night, the crates would have remained buried. The tunnel would have gone undiscovered. The prisoner would have been left behind. And tomorrow's parade would have ended not in celebration but in mourning. Instead, the city stood safe. Days later, during a small ceremony at the very helipad where it all began, Ranger was honored. The circle of concrete that once concealed darkness now held a line of uniformed officers standing tall, their badges gleaming under the morning sun. Ranger sat proudly at the center, a medal placed gently against his harness. The applause that rose from the crowd carried a deeper meaning than most would ever know. Only those who stood in that underground chamber had seen the truth, and they all knew it wasn't just instinct that saved the city. It was loyalty, determination, and a bond between a dog and his handler that refused to ignore what others couldn't see. As the ceremony ended, Ranger lifted his head, ears twitching at the sound of a distant helicopter passing overhead. His eyes locked skyward, calm but alert, as though always ready for the next call. For now, though, the helipad was silent. Its secret exposed, its danger dismantled, and the dog who had uncovered it all rested with pride, knowing the city above him slept safely because he had refused to stop barking at the shadows. If one dog's bark could uncover a secret that saved an entire city, just imagine what's coming in the next story. You don't want to be the one hearing about it late, so hit like right now, drop a quick comment, and make sure you're subscribed. The next twist could be the one everyone's talking about.